Everybody, my name is Luke Thomas. I'm the founder of Friday, and I want to walk you through what I believe is one of the most underrated yet most important parts of figuring out how to really work remotely. And so I recorded a video before where I broke down kind of the differences between asynchronous and synchronous communication. And for those who haven't seen that video yet, the basic idea is that I walk through different communication styles and how it works and the different tools that you can use and the importance of why you need to kind of pick the right communication tool for the message. Now, in this video, I really want to dive into why asynchronous work is the key to working from anywhere. My hope is that at the end of this video, you will have a clear understanding and diagnosis of what is causing so much pain for so many companies as they figure out this whole like work from anywhere model. So let's just jump right in. So the first thing we should talk about is like why do people like working remotely? Now the first thing I believe and that I would encourage you to think about is when you hear people say like, "Hey, I like working remotely." Is that because they like working from their home office, or is there like a deeper reason? Right? Because like people are social animals, right? We want to be around others. So this idea of like being cooped up at home with like cabin fever just working, like why is that? Like why do people say that they like that? It doesn't make any sense, right? At least from first glance. But and this is why it's so important. Like there's something underneath the surface. And the case that I would posit to you is that it's not about working from home. The reason why people talk about the benefits and why they like working remotely is because they have more freedom in their workday and more flexibility in their schedule. And this is a very valuable kind of benefit that is incredibly important for individuals, especially when you have to like work 8-10 hours a day, whatever the workday looks like for you, right? And so the ability to work when you want, not only where you want, is a really important driver. Okay, and so I pulled up a few different graphics pulled from some research to really kind of drive this point home. So in a Buffer state of remote work report, they asked what's the biggest benefit you see to working remotely. 32% had the ability to have a flexible schedule, and then 25% said flexibility to work from anywhere. You see 22% said not having to commute. Well, if you think about it, it very much ties in with this idea of a flexible schedule, right? I don't have to commute, therefore I have more freedom in my day. The same is true for ability to spend time with family. You can see the ability to work from home is way down at the bottom. So it's very clear that it's not about just working from home. Here's another piece of research. I can't remember the new name. I think it's Nero, but it used to be FYI. They did a similar study, and they found that the top 3 reasons people would recommend working remotely to a friend: freedom and flexibility is number 1, no commute, and increased productivity is number 3. Right? So hopefully you're starting to see a trend here. Slack, the people over at the Future Forum, kind of like a nonprofit arm over at Slack, they've been doing some really cool research as well. And they talk about kind of this idea of the hybrid work model. And what you can see is that they ran a survey and they found that people certainly want flexibility in where they work, but overwhelmingly people want flexibility in when they work. Right? So it's about this more flexible work environment. Right? And so this is the nugget. This is the thing that a company needs to optimize for. If you think about being able to navigate the workplace of the future, it's like, how can we create a more flexible workplace so that employees feel like they have freedom because they actually do, right? And so this brings me to my next point. Like, this is the expectation. This is kind of the huge value proposition of being able to work from anywhere. But like, is this actually happening or not? I would argue that it's not for most companies. Take a look at this research from Robert Half to really kind of start to unpack like what is actually happening here. So what you can see is that working weekends is a reality for nearly 7 in 10 remote professionals. And so it's like, okay, cool. I mean, this isn't good, right? But what you can see is that more working parents than professionals without children said that they typically spend weekends and more than 8 hours a day performing job related tasks at home, right? So here's the idea: people are spending more time working in a remote work world, right? And so they're putting in longer hours. They are working on the weekends. And the question is like, is this actually a good thing, right? Is there a deeper issue here? Here's another piece of research. I believe this is from The Economist. They talk about this research that was done, and I'll just read right through it. The research certainly concluded that employees were working hard. Total hours worked were 30% higher than before the pandemic, including an 18% increase in working outside normal hours, which is similar to that research we read before. But the extra effort did not translate into any rise in output. The interesting thing is why this happened. The academics were able to analyze how much time the employees spent in collaboration hours, defined as various types of meetings, and how much time they had as focus hours. Despite working longer hours, the employees had less focus time than before the pandemic. Instead, all their extra time was taken up by meetings. So hopefully this is starting to paint a picture, right? And the idea is like, oh, remote work is great because it's more flexible. I have the ability to kind of like work when I want and where I want. But there's these issues. So what is actually getting in our way here? So I would argue there's a few components. The first is that the office previously taught you to over prioritize real time or synchronous communication because you were all together in the same room. Meetings were cheap. It was easier to kind of walk around and learn what people were working on. People were present at the same moment in time, at least generally. And so it was easy to just default to real time conversations to figure out what people were working on, to have collaboration, to have hold those meetings or do whiteboarding, right? So you've been trained this way for years or decades. And so it's easy, or it's very difficult to kind of break this habit. The second is that you have this rise in workplace chat apps. And so these apps are, it's just like constant notifications, right? If you think about email, well, workplace chat is like the email notifications on steroids, because sure, you can like mute some certain things and sometimes you can, but they have this built-in expectation that you should come back, you should see what's going on, rinse and repeat, right? And so what it's doing is it's turning those potential focus time sessions into times where you're just checking Slack, trying to figure out what people are working on, and it's creating distractions, right? So this is this is part two, right? Before it's like you're hanging out in the office created an environment that prioritized real-time conversations. Now you have workplace chat, and then you have meetings, right? And meetings is one of the biggest culprits. And I think about meetings as like this fallback. It's like when things go wrong, have a meeting. When I don't understand what's going on, hold a meeting. When I need to chat with a coworker about something, hold a meeting, right? Meetings in a remote first world have become a lot more expensive. It's much more difficult to coordinate people across time zones. Sometimes people like to work different schedules. And so when you require that everybody be present at the same moment in time, there's a coordination cost involved, right? And so here's like what's happening. There's this promise of a more flexible work environment. There's a promise of more freedom, but we're being kind of glued to our desk because of the processes that we've used in the past and because of the tools that were built for a kind of previous way of working. And I'm not going to like, I use workplace chat, I use Zoom, but I think the question is like, when should you actually use that? Right? When should you use those tools? Because right now people are just defaulting to this way too much. I've worked remotely for 8 years and I've seen this over and over and over again, right? This is nothing new. But what it does require is like, if you want to break this kind of negative feedback loop, you have to create more intentional ways of working. So what can we do about it? The root shift that needs to happen, and I will create a bunch of videos to outline specific workflows that you can do to make and accelerate this transition. But at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is you're trying to shift from being a business that is based on the real-time interactions to a business where you still do that, but you treat it as a tool in your toolbox and you try to default to asynchronous or a more flexible way of communicating by default, right? Because you're trying to tap into what makes working from anywhere so great, which is the freedom and the flexibility. You will not get there if you spend your entire day on Zoom calls, in workplace chat, or trying to replicate the office online. You're just not going to get there, right? And so it's about picking the tool for the job at hand. And it just so happens that you can be asynchronous more often than you need to engage in a real time meeting or a real time conversation. So, this is the shift that needs to happen. And this is the shift that the companies who have spent years working remotely have done through a lot of trial and error. So, this, once again, it's like before you'd spend 80% of your workday communicating in real time. Now you need to almost do the exact opposite. And this breakdown is not meant to be prescriptive, it's meant to kind of provide a framework for thinking about this. And so at the end of the day, I'm going to outline a bunch of different workflows that you can use to make this transition, because this is the issue that so many companies are facing. You're running into this pain because you're spending so much time in meetings, you're bombarded with notifications, and you're like, there's got to be a better way. You can kind of squint and you can see this promise of a more flexible and a freeing workday. But there's some roadblocks. And so in future videos, I'm going to walk you through specific workflows or processes that you can implement to help facilitate and make the transition to a more asynchronous way of working so that you can have a more flexible work environment and so that you can keep your employees happy. So I hope that makes sense. And I will share some more videos in the future. Thanks. Bye.